What's up, everybody? Good to see everyone back for another video. We're going to take on one of the biggest questions that I hear all the time from business owners who are moving or expanding their operations in the cloud. Do you need to build a cloud-first system, or can you lift and shift your existing infrastructure just straight into the cloud? I told you we're going to go for it and tackling the big question today, so get settled in and let's get started. I think one of the best ways to approach this question is to look at the pros and cons of both options. A lot of the times, what you think maybe is a hard decision isn't all that difficult once you are looking at the clear advantages and the downsides. So let's go ahead and start with the lift and shift option. What is it, and why might you want to do it this way? What are the advantages of choosing this option? Those are the questions we're going to attempt to answer. Just like it sounds, the lift and shift method involves lifting your existing workflows and workloads directly from your server and pipelines or your developer's laptop and shifting them over to the cloud via a VM or a Docker container. Sounds easy enough. But that must be the clear winner. Not so fast. When has anything that sounds quick and easy ever turned out to be quick and easy? Don't get me wrong, this method works, and for some it may even work well, but for most there's going to be a few loose ends to sort out after the move. So, what are the upsides? Why do people choose the lift and shift option? That's an easy one. People opt for lift and shift because it seems like the quickest and easiest choice. Whether or not that is true is a different matter. For the purpose of answering this question, lift and shift seems like the easiest way. Okay, so what are the downsides? That's not an easy question to answer because your specific downsides are going to differ from someone else's downsides. When you move existing systems directly into the cloud, you're bringing along all the baggage that comes with them, whether that's legacy VM or containerized application that's already been tailored to your on-premise setup. So the downsides that you'll experience will depend on what you're moving and how you have it set up. In some cases, you may not know the full extent of any downsides until you make the move. The lift and shift method can be the easiest way to move to the cloud initially, and it's tempting when you're rushing to get your MVP up and running. But once you factor in the work needed to get fully operational again, those early speed advantages slip away just as quickly, and the expenses start to pile up pretty fast as well. So if you really want or need to go for the lift and shift route, here are some key factors which you will need to be prepared to deal with. First is security. Cloud vendor security management services are intended to work with their offerings. If you are bringing in your homespun VM or Docker image, the onus will be on you to provide patches to the software and dependencies within the stack, and that can cause an exciting management headache. That is one key factor. You will also want to think about the resilience of your service. How will it scale? How will it handle failover? How will upgrades be managed? These questions are important at both the application and the operating system level. Let's break out the trusty whiteboard and walk through the build process for a typical non-native app stack. So we are going to keep this simple. We aren't trying to impress everyone here. We're just trying to make a solid utility app that does something like, let's say, track stock prices. Because who doesn't like a stock market demo, right? So first up, we've got stock data flowing in, and we need to catch it before it disappears. So how do we do that? Let's look at Kafka. Think of Kafka like a big bucket where we throw all the data so we don't miss anything while we're still getting ready to process it. Next, we need to deal with the data. We're going to lift that data right out of Kafka and drop it into a more permanent data store. Again, we want to keep this super simple, so we're just going to use a basic Python script to read the stream, clean up the data using pandas, which is great for making everything nice and organized, and then we'll save that into a Postgres database. Perfect. So our ingestion layer is done. We've got our data stored. Now we need a way for users to interact with it. That's easy enough. We'll build an API that hooks into the Postgres database. But wait, we can't just let anyone access this thing, right? We're going to need some sort of security. In the interest of simplicity, we can throw some basic authentication requirements stored in the same database. Lastly, we need the front end, and this is the part that the users will actually see, so it needs to be decent. We'll go ahead and use React.js for the UI and run it on a Node.js server sitting in a virtual machine. And so that's our app stack built on-premise. Reasonably simple, provides a stock demo. So now that we've covered the lift and shift approach, let's talk about an alternative option that many businesses are leaning toward, which is cloud first. The cloud first method is all about building your system specifically for the cloud, instead of taking something that already exists and moving it over. And this may sound like more work up front, but I'm going to explain why in most cases it's worth it. So what does it mean to build cloud first? Essentially, instead of using your existing infrastructure or processes, you design and build your systems to take full advantage of everything the cloud has to offer from the start. This could mean using serverless architectures, managed services, or other cloud-native technologies. And let's talk about why this might be right for you. The biggest benefit of the cloud-first method is optimization. By building directly for the cloud, you can design your systems to work exactly how the cloud is intended to operate. You get access to services that auto-scale based on demand, reducing the need to over-provision resources. You can also gain better resilience and security by leveraging cloud-native offerings. Cloud vendors spend millions, sometimes billions, on their infrastructure, and when you build cloud first, you can take advantage of that scale, power, and reliability. Cost efficiency is another major factor. Instead of bringing legacy baggage with you, you're only paying for what you need. You're using cloud-native resources that are specifically built for performance, scalability, security in the cloud environment. In the long run, this approach can save you a lot of money. Plus, it's reasonably future-proof. As your business scales, cloud-first infrastructures can adapt without requiring you to overhaul your existing systems. Okay, so are there any cons? There are, but most are related to upfront investment and time. Building for the cloud requires planning and expertise from the get-go, unlike lift and shift, which can get you up and running quickly, even if not optimally. A cloud-first approach requires you to spend more time architecting your solution. This may slow down your time to market. In fact, in the interest of fairness, let's get out the old whiteboard again and build up a cloud-first version of our stock tracking app. Now, what would that look like? First, the back end. Trying to build the same thing as before. So forget running Kafka on your own servers. That's way too much hassle. Instead, let's go with a cloud option. AWS, for example, there are other cloud services available, has two easy services for messaging, SNS and SQS. These are simple and get the job done for most cases. But if you need to handle a ton of data quickly, these might not cut it. So we go with AWS Managed Kafka instead. Just like the name says, it's Kafka, but it's fully managed inside of AWS. So no more babysitting servers, just focus on your data stream. Now that we've got the streaming part set up, we need to get that data into the database. But instead of doing the old school batch processing, we want real-time updates. You could write some Python code to handle this, or you could just use AWS tools. AWS Glue would be perfect here. It can connect to SNS and manage Kafka, keeping the stock data flowing smoothly into your data store. You can even have glue right to S3, or in our case, to a JDBC-backed data store like Postgres. Speaking of databases, we don't want to manage that either. For most apps, Amazon RDS is the go-to. It's fully managed, it comes in different flavors, and even has a serverless option for extra flexibility. If your app does heavy analytics and dashboards, maybe consider Redshift instead. It's designed for big data queries that might give you better performance. So that's our cloud backend sorted. What about exposing this to users? You could take your existing Flask backend and lift and shift it to the cloud, but that's often not the smartest move. It's going to be much easier to use AWS API Gateway. It scales automatically and takes care of all that sort of messy networking stuff for you. To handle the processing logic behind your API, go with Lambda functions. They're serverless, so you only pay when they're running, which means no users, no cost. We can take care of security with AWS Cognito. It will lock your API and UI so only authorized users can access it. Plus, it integrates easily with API Gateway and a bunch of other AWS services. So no patching or compatibility headaches there. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Let's talk about the UI. The easiest way I've found to handle this is via AWS CloudFront. There are, of course, a bunch of different ways you could do this, but CloudFront is a content delivery service that serves your apps from servers close to your users. So it's super fast, and you don't have to do anything fancy to configure it. Just compile your app into some JavaScript HTML and throw it into CloudFront. And that's it. We're done. And I think I showed you that there's a cloud solution for just about anything that you need to do. So to answer our initial question, I'm almost always going to recommend building cloud-first apps. If you're moving to the cloud, why not make it easier on yourself and take full advantage of the modern architecture? There's still one more question that I want to address on this topic, and that is the multi-cloud approach. There is a lot of buzz lately about the idea of building multi-cloud workloads. And before we talk about why you may or may not want to do this, we do need to make sure we are all on the same page about what it means to be multi-cloud. For this discussion, I'm talking about the idea that you should be building workflows that are cloud agnostic and then running them across one or more cloud providers simultaneously. Proponents of this practice point to the idea that spreading your workload across several cloud vendors can increase your agility and lower your overhead costs. Neither of these beliefs is supported by real-world evidence. Don't get me wrong, if we could build systems that would allow businesses to just swap out infrastructure like plugins on an as-needed basis, that would make all of us a lot more agile. Kubernetes does some of that, but it still often has its own quirks per cloud vendor. And that is not just the reality we live in. The reality of data centers and clouds is that every significant shift or move is going to require a new set of adjustments, configuring, and workarounds to get everything running smoothly and reliably. You'll be back to doing a significant proportion of the heavy lifting yourself, and you won't be getting the full optimization benefits of any of the clouds that you are using. So every decision has advantages and disadvantages. Some assert that being non-committal and keeping your options open by not locking in to one cloud vendor puts you in a position to bargain for the lowest costs. I think that most cases will show us that spreading your commitment around multiple vendors actually weakens your negotiating power with individual cloud vendors themselves, locks you out of high volume or high spend discounts, and prevents you from enjoying the full functionality and convenience of any one vendor. You will also need to factor in the extra spending that you are doing in terms of time and expertise to keep everything running smoothly across multiple clouds. Now, of course, there are exceptions. If your business provides mission-critical services and failure is not an option, then yes, you are more than likely going to want to have additional versions of your workload running on different clouds. In most cases, you're going to be in a much better position to score preferential pricing and optimize service when you stick with one cloud vendor. The less time that you spend tinkering with your infrastructure and the more time you can spend bringing new products or services to market and growing your business. All right, we covered a lot today. Let's run back through it just to make sure we got all the questions answered. We looked at your options when it came to moving your workload to the cloud. You can just lift and shift your current system, or is building cloud first the better way to go? We showed the limitations and the complications that lift and shift method invariably leads to, and how taking the time to build a cloud-first system now will save you a lot of frustration and let you take full advantage of all that the cloud has to offer. We also explored the concept of running a multi-cloud system to avoid getting locked into any particular vendor. We learned the reality that multi-cloud theory so far fails to deliver on cost or time savings, so why overcomplicate your business if you don't absolutely have to? Ultimately, the right cloud strategy depends on your specific needs. For most businesses, a cloud-first approach with a single cloud provider is the best option. That's it, everybody. That's all I've got for today. Be sure to check back here for the next video we're finishing up now. We have several more videos in the pipeline providing straightforward, no hype answers to questions that we hear the most. Feel free to drop any questions that you have that you've been pondering in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them in future videos. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.